We have began talking about all the elements that are found in living things, the main ones being carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Now today we're going to talk about how living things use these. When we put these, we're going to specifically talk about carbon today. Carbon, anything that is made up of carbon is called an organic molecule. And specifically, it is called a macromolecule. A macromolecule is a giant molecule. It's made up of thousands of smaller molecules, so it's like a puzzle. So you have one large puzzle, but it's made up of a lot of smaller pieces. We call it polymerization when you make these macromolecules, because you're putting one small individual thing and making it very large, which poly means many different things. Now, when we're talking about those smaller pieces, they are called monomers. These are the small units that go together. That would be like one single puzzle piece. And when you put them all together, you have a polymer. Poly means many, so you have many of those monomers put together. So it's a large molecule, and it's made from the monomers. So like I said, the monomer would be a small puzzle piece, and the polymer would be the large puzzle put together. So when we're talking about this, when I said a macromolecule is actually a polymer because it's made up of many smaller things. Now, how this relates to what we're talking about is this brings us to organic compounds. Organic compounds are macromolecules. They are a large thing that are made up of very smaller things. Now, an organic compound is a compound that contains carbon. In living things, there are 4 different organic compounds, and I think you guys are familiar with them. 3 of the 4 you have to eat on a daily basis. They are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and then nucleic acids are the one that you do not consume. So, starting out, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. You guys consume carbohydrates when you eat breads, sugars, starches, and this is the main source of energy for all living things, but it also is there for structural purposes. We know that carbohydrates, that is a macromolecule. Carbohydrates are made up of a subunit, or the monomers, called monosaccharides. So these would be like your glucose, your fructose, and galactose. Those are your simple sugars. And you put those together and you make larger molecules, such as disaccharides that have 2 sugars, or polysaccharides that have many sugars. Polysaccharides would be more like your starches, like potatoes and things like that. The next macromolecule, or organic compound, are lipids. Now, lipids are the fats that we consume. The elements that are in lipids are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen also. Now, if you think about lipids, they are they store energy very well. So if you don't use the energy you're getting from carbohydrates, you're going to store that in fat. They're also a biological membrane. Your cell membrane is made up of what are called phospholipids. And on plants, they are the waterproof coverings. Now, fats, they are a macromolecule, or a large organic compound, and their monomers are glycerol and fatty acids. When we're talking about fats, you can have saturated that have only single bonds when they're bonding with the hydrogen and oxygen, or unsaturated, and they have at least one double bond when it's holds the compound together. The next one are proteins. When you guys eat meat, eggs, cheese, those are all considered proteins. Now, the elements that proteins have are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So now we're including the nitrogen. Proteins play an important role in living things. They control the rate of reactions in your body, or in plants they also do that. They help form bones and muscles, And they also help transport substances in and out of your cells. They're kind of a channel that will allow things to move in and out. The monomer of proteins, so the smaller subunit, are called amino acids. So what you do is you break down, when you eat protein, you break down those protein into amino acids. And then your body uses those amino acids and makes new proteins. So proteins form enzymes and they act as biological catalysts. So what they do is they speed up reactions in your body. And we'll talk more about that on Monday. And then the last one we have are called nucleic acids. These are not things that you consume. They are just produced in your body. The elements that make that up are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. This is your DNA. So its function is to store and transmit genetic information. And so all of your genetic information is stored on DNA. And the smaller subunits or monomers for nucleic acids are called nucleotides. So an example of a nucleic acid, like I said, would be DNA and RNA. RNA, if you're not familiar with it, we'll talk more about that next semester.